The whip crack of flesh meeting flesh echoed through the small wooden cabin, followed by a cry that sent birds scattering from nearby trees. Josephine Owens clutched her reddening cheek, tears welling in her hazel eyes as her older brother Randall towered over her, his face contorted with rage in the dim lamplight of their frontier home outside Sweetwater Creek, Colorado Territory, 1875. "I've told you before, Josie," Randall spat, his breath heavy with whiskey. "You don't question my decisions. Not about the cattle, not about the land, and certainly not about who I do business with." Josephine steadied herself against the rough-hewn table, her 19-year-old frame trembling, but her spirit unbroken. "They're stealing from us, Randall. Those men you're selling our cattle to are paying half what they're worth, and you're too blind with drink to see it." Randall's hand rose again, and Josephine flinched, but the expected blow never landed. Instead, the cabin door burst open, framing the silhouette of a tall man against the setting Colorado sun. "Not again, Randall," came the steady, deep voice of Henry Adamson. He stood in the doorway, trail dust coating his denim pants and cotton shirt, his cowboy hat tipped low over piercing blue eyes. "That's no way to treat your sister." Randall spun around, his balance unsteady. "This ain't your business, Adamson. Get off my property." Henry stepped into the cabin, his spurs jingling softly against the wooden floor. "Made it my business when I heard the commotion from the trail. Miss Owens deserves better than your backhand for speaking her mind." Josephine wiped away a tear, embarrassment and relief washing over her in equal measure. Henry Adamson was new to Sweetwater Creek, having arrived just 3 months prior to work as a ranch hand for the neighboring Thornton spread. In that short time, he'd earned a reputation as a hard worker with a strong moral compass, something increasingly rare in these untamed territories. "You work for Thornton, not the law," Randall sneered, swaying slightly. "Unless you're wearing a badge under that dusty shirt, I suggest you mind your own affairs." Henry's eyes flicked to Josephine, noting the red mark blooming on her cheek. Something dark and protective stirred in him. "Miss Owens, would you care to join me for some fresh air? I reckon your brother could use some time to cool his temper." Before Randall could protest, Josephine grabbed her shawl from a hook by the door. "I would appreciate that, Mr. Adamson." Outside, the late afternoon sun painted the Colorado mountains gold and crimson. Henry led Josephine to his horse, a sturdy Appaloosa with intelligent eyes. They walked in silence until they were a safe distance from the cabin. "This isn't the first time," Henry finally said. It wasn't a question. Josephine wrapped her arms around herself, the evening chill settling on her skin. "Since our parents died 2 years ago, Randall's been different. The drink makes him mean. No amount of grief justifies raising a hand to family," Henry said firmly. "Especially not to a lady." Josephine touched her cheek gingerly. "He wasn't always like this. Before Ma and Pa passed from the fever, Randall was kind. He taught me to ride, to shoot. Now he gambles away our profits and makes poor business decisions. I only spoke up because we'll lose the ranch if this continues." Henry nodded, understanding in his eyes. "My father was similar after my mother passed. Mean with the bottle, quick with his fists." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I left Virginia because of it. No one should live in fear of those meant to protect them." They reached a fallen log beside a small creek, and Henry offered it to Josephine as a seat. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the space beside her. When she nodded, he sat, maintaining a respectful distance. "What will you do now?" he asked. Josephine stared at the flowing water, the sound soothing her frayed nerves. "Return home, I suppose. Where else would I go? The ranch is as much mine as Randall's, even if he forgets that fact." Henry removed his hat, running a hand through sun-bleached brown hair. "You deserve better, Miss Owens." "Josephine," she corrected softly. "Or Josie, if you prefer." "Josephine," he repeated, the name sounding like music on his lips. "I'm Henry." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits who understood hardship and resilience. "Thank you for intervening, Henry. Not many would." He replaced his hat, adjusting it with practiced ease. "Anyone decent would have done the same." "We both know that's not true," she replied, a sad smile touching her lips. "Decency is scarce in these parts." The setting sun had nearly disappeared behind the mountains when Henry escorted Josephine back to the cabin. Randall's horse was gone. Likely he'd headed into town to continue drinking at the saloon. "Will you be safe?" Henry asked, concern etching his features. Josephine nodded. "He won't return until morning, if his pattern holds true." Henry hesitated, then reached into his saddlebag, retrieving a small revolver. "Take this. For protection." Josephine's eyes widened. "I couldn't possibly." "Please," Henry insisted. "I have another. I'd rest easier knowing you have it." After a moment's hesitation, she accepted the weapon, its weight unfamiliar yet somehow reassuring in her palm. "I'll return it when I can." "Keep it as long as needed," Henry said. "And Josephine, if you ever need help, the Thornton Ranch is just over the East Ridge. Ask for me." With a tip of his hat, Henry mounted his horse and disappeared into the gathering darkness, leaving Josephine with a strange fluttering in her chest she hadn't felt in years if ever. The next morning brought clear skies and the return of Randall, surly and hungover. He made no mention of the previous evening's altercation, and Josephine went about her chores in cautious silence. Days passed in this uneasy peace, with Josephine taking greater care to avoid confrontation with her brother. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. One week after their first meeting, Josephine was in town purchasing supplies when she encountered Henry outside the general store. His face brightened upon seeing her, and he tipped his hat in greeting. "Miss Josephine." A pleasant surprise. She couldn't help but smile in return, her basket of goods clutched tightly in her hands. "Mr. Adamson, how are you faring at the Thornton place?" "Well enough," he replied, falling into step beside her as she moved down the boardwalk. "Though I hear they're selling a portion of their northern grazing land. Your brother might be interested." Josephine's smile faded. "I doubt we have the funds. Randall's choices have left our finances strained." Henry frowned. "I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything I can do to help?" She shook her head. "You've done more than most already." Her words were cut short by the appearance of Randall, stumbling out of the saloon across the street. His bloodshot eyes narrowed when he spotted Josephine with Henry. "Josephine," he bellowed, causing several passers-by to turn and stare. "Get over here. Now." Henry's posture stiffened. "Let me speak with him." "No," Josephine whispered urgently. "You'll only make it worse." But even as she said it, she knew she couldn't avoid a confrontation. Taking a deep breath, she crossed the dusty street, aware of Henry following at a discreet distance. "What are you doing with that Thornton hand?" Randall demanded, his words slurring slightly. "Just exchanging pleasantries, Randall. Nothing more." Her brother gripped her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "Don't lie to me. I saw how you looked at him. You think I don't know what you're up to." "You're hurting me," Josephine said, trying to keep her voice steady. "People are watching." "Let them watch," Randall spat. "Maybe they'll see what happens when a sister disrespects her brother's authority." Before she could respond, Randall began dragging her toward their wagon. Josephine struggled, dropping her basket, its contents spilling across the dirt street. "Stop it, Randall," she protested, raising her voice in a rare display of public defiance. "You're drunk and making a scene." The back of Randall's hand caught her across the mouth, splitting her lip. Josephine tasted blood as she stumbled backward. "Not again." Henry's voice cut through the shocked murmurs of the townsfolk who had gathered to watch. He stepped between the siblings, his normally gentle eyes hard with anger. "That's twice now I've seen you strike your sister, Randall Owens. There won't be a third." Randall released Josephine to face Henry. "This is family business, Cowboy. Step aside." "No," Henry said simply. "Miss Owens deserves respect, not abuse." Randall's face darkened with rage. With surprising speed for a drunk man, he swung at Henry, who ducked the blow and responded with a swift punch to Randall's midsection. Randall doubled over, gasping for breath, then charged forward, tackling Henry to the ground. The two men rolled in the street dust, trading blows as the crowd grew. Sheriff Miller pushed through, his weathered face grim as he pulled his revolver. "That's enough," he shouted, firing a warning shot into the air. The fighting stopped immediately. "Both of you on your feet." Henry stood first, offering a hand to Randall, who slapped it away and struggled upright on his own. Both men were dusty and bloodied. "He attacked me, Sheriff," Randall said, pointing an accusing finger. interfered in a private matter between me and my sister. Sheriff Miller turned to Josephine, noting her split lip with a frown. That true, Miss Owens? Josephine straightened her shoulders, making a decision that would forever alter the course of her life. No, Sheriff. Mr. Adamson was protecting me. My brother struck me for speaking to him in public. She touched her bleeding lip. This is his handiwork. The sheriff's expression hardened. Is that so? Well, Mr. Owens, we have laws in this town against public disturbances and assaulting women. I believe a night in my jail might help you remember that. As the sheriff led a protesting Randall away, Josephine felt a strange lightness, as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Henry approached cautiously, his right eye beginning to swell. Are you all right? He asked, his concern evident despite his own injuries. Josephine nodded, then reached out impulsively to touch the bruise forming on his cheekbone. I should be asking you that. You're injured because of me. Henry's hand covered hers, warm and calloused. Worth every bruise to see you stand up to him. In that moment, with the town's curious eyes upon them, something shifted between Josephine and Henry, a connection deepening beyond mere acquaintance into something neither could yet name. What happens now? Henry asked quietly. Josephine glanced toward the jail where her brother was being taken. I don't know, she admitted. But for the first time in years, I feel like I have a choice. The events in town that day marked the beginning of significant changes. Randall, sobered by his night in jail and the public humiliation, returned to the ranch with simmering resentment but tempered behavior. Josephine, emboldened by her stand, began taking a more active role in the ranch's management, reviewing the accounts and discovering just how dire their financial situation had become. Meanwhile, Henry found increasingly frequent reasons to ride past the Owens ranch, checking fences along the shared property line, returning tools supposedly borrowed, bringing news from town. Each visit brought him and Josephine closer, their conversations lengthening, their mutual respect deepening into undeniable attraction. 2 weeks after the incident in town, Josephine was mending fences on the eastern boundary when Henry appeared on his Appaloosa, leading a second horse laden with supplies. Thought you might need some help, he called, dismounting with fluid grace. Thornton gave me the afternoon off. Josephine couldn't suppress her smile. How convenient that you chose to spend it fixing my broken fence. Not just the fence that needs mending around here, Henry replied, his meaning clear as he rolled up his sleeves and set to work alongside her. They worked in companionable silence, the rhythm of their hammers punctuated by occasional conversation. Henry spoke of his life in Virginia, his journey west after his father's death, his dreams of someday owning land. Josephine shared stories of her parents, of happier times on the ranch, of her own hopes for the future. You're good at this, Henry observed as Josephine deftly repaired a section of fencing. Most ladies I know wouldn't know which end of a hammer to hold. Josephine laughed, the sound bright in the clear mountain air. I'm hardly most ladies, Mr. Adamson. Our mother believed daughters should be as capable as sons. A wise woman, Henry said, admiration evident in his voice. She raised an exceptional daughter. Their eyes met over the fence post, and Josephine felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. Henry stepped closer, his hand reaching to brush a strand of hair from her face. Josephine, he began, his voice husky with emotion. I know we haven't known each other long, but Josie. Randall's angry shout shattered the moment. He approached on horseback, rifle in hand. Step away from her, Adamson. Henry moved protectively in front of Josephine. We're just mending fences, Owens. Nothing improper. Randall dismounted, his movements stiff with anger. I've seen how you look at my sister. I'm not blind. And I've seen how you treat her, Henry countered. That's the real issue here, isn't it? You're afraid she'll leave. This is our land, Randall said, his voice cold. Our parents' legacy. She has responsibilities here. To you? Or to the ranch? Henry challenged. Because from what I can see, you're running both into the ground. Randall raised his rifle, pointing it squarely at Henry's chest. Get off my land, cowboy. Don't come back. Randall, stop this. Josephine stepped around Henry, placing herself between the two men. Put the gun down. We were working, nothing more. Move aside, Josie, Randall ordered, his finger hovering near the trigger. No, she replied firmly. I won't let you hurt him. If Henry goes, I go with him." The declaration surprised even Josephine herself, but as soon as the words left her mouth, she knew they were true. In the short time she'd known Henry Adamson, he'd shown her more respect and kindness than her brother had in years. Randall's face contorted with rage and betrayal. "You'd choose this stranger over your own blood? Over our family's land? I'd choose a life without fear," Josephine answered honestly. "You're my brother, Randall, and I love you. But I can't live like this anymore." For a tense moment, Randall's rifle remained trained on them. Then, with a curse, he lowered the weapon. "Fine, go. But don't expect anything from this ranch. Not a penny, not an acre. Keep it all," Josephine said quietly. "I just want my freedom." Randall spat on the ground, then remounted his horse. "You'll regret this, Josie. The world out there isn't kind to women alone." With a final glare at Henry, he rode away, dust billowing in his wake. When he was gone, Josephine let out a shaky breath, suddenly uncertain. "I didn't mean to," she began. Henry took her hands in his. "Did you mean what you said? About going with me?" She looked up into his earnest face, seeing the hope there, and nodded slowly. "Yes, but I have nowhere to go, Henry. No money, no prospects." "You have me," he said simply. "If you'll have me." "We barely know each other," Josephine protested weakly, even as her heart raced at his proximity. Henry's smile was gentle. "I know enough. I know you're brave and strong and kinder than this world deserves. I know I've thought about you every day since we met. The rest, we can learn together. If you're willing." In answer, Josephine rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his, a kiss as tender as it was momentous, her first act of true independence. That evening, Josephine returned to the ranch house to collect her meager belongings while Randall sulked in stony silence. She left behind a letter explaining her decision and expressing hope for reconciliation when his anger cooled. Henry waited for her at the property line, and together they rode to the Thornton Ranch, where Mrs. Thornton, a kindly widow who had taken a liking to Josephine in town, offered her temporary lodging in the cook's quarters. The following weeks brought rapid changes. Henry, who had been saving diligently since arriving in Colorado, revealed his plan to purchase a small homestead of his own. With the addition of Josephine's expert knowledge of cattle and ranching, their shared dream began taking tangible shape. "It's not much," Henry admitted as they stood on a hillside overlooking the 20 acres he hoped to claim. "Just a start. But the soil's good. There's water year-round from that creek, and we could build something here. Together." Josephine surveyed the land with a rancher's practiced eye. "It's beautiful, Henry. Perfect for raising cattle. And a family." Their eyes met, an unspoken promise passing between them. 2 days later, Henry formally asked for Josephine's hand, presenting her with a simple silver ring he'd purchased with his savings. They were married by the circuit preacher the following Sunday in the Thorntons' front parlor, with Mrs. Thornton and a few friendly townspeople as witnesses. Notably absent was Randall, though Josephine had sent him an invitation. Their wedding night was spent in a small cabin on their new property, a temporary dwelling until they could build a proper home. As they lay together in the darkness, the sounds of the Colorado wilderness surrounding them, Josephine felt a contentment she hadn't experienced since before her parents' deaths. "Are you happy, Mrs. Adamson?" Henry whispered, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Josephine smiled in the darkness. "Happier than I ever imagined possible." Spring turned to summer, and the Adamsons worked from dawn until dusk establishing their homestead. They built fences, planted a vegetable garden, purchased a small herd of cattle, and began construction on a permanent home. The work was hard but satisfying, each day bringing them closer to their shared vision. Josephine discovered skills she never knew she possessed: negotiating cattle prices at auction, keeping meticulous accounts, even helping design their house. Henry, for his part, proved to be not just a skilled cattleman, but a capable builder and a patient teacher. Their happiness, however, was not without challenges. In early August, Josephine returned from town to find Henry engaged in a heated argument with Randall at the edge of their property. "You have no right," Randall was shouting as she approached. "That water source is on Owens' land." "The survey says differently," Henry replied calmly. "The creek crosses the property line. We're entitled to access. You stole my sister, and now you want to steal my water?" Randall's face was flushed with anger. I should have shot you when I had the chance. Randall. Josephine dismounted quickly, moving to stand beside her husband. That's enough. Henry didn't steal me, I chose to leave. And he's right about the water rights. They're clearly defined in the land office records. Randall's gaze hardened as he looked at his sister. You look different. Josephine unconsciously placed a hand on her stomach, where the first signs of pregnancy were just beginning to show. I'm happy, Randall. I wish you could be happy for me. Something flickered in her brother's eyes, regret, perhaps, or recognition of what he'd lost through his own actions. For a moment, Josephine thought he might soften. Instead, he straightened in his saddle. This isn't over, Adamson, he warned. Nobody takes what's mine. With a final glare, he rode away. He's drinking again, Josephine observed sadly. I can see it in his eyes. Henry wrapped an arm around her shoulders. He'll come around, or he won't. Either way, we'll be all right. But Randall's threats proved more than empty words. 2 nights later, the Adamsons awoke to the smell of smoke and the terrifying orange glow of flames. Their barn, containing their small hay harvest and most of their tools, was ablaze. Working desperately with neighbors summoned by the commotion, they managed to save the horses and cattle, but the barn itself was reduced to ashes. In the ruins, Henry found an empty whiskey bottle, Randall's preferred brand. We can't prove it was him, Josephine said as they surveyed the damage in the gray dawn light. And even if we could, he's still your brother, Henry finished, understanding in his weary eyes. But this has to stop, Josephine. Next time it could be our home. Or worse. Decision made. They rode to town that morning to speak with Sheriff Miller. The lawman listened to their suspicions with a grave expression. I'll have a word with Randall, he promised. But without witnesses, it's your word against his. As they left the sheriff's office, a commotion down the street caught their attention. A crowd had gathered outside the saloon, voices raised in alarm. Pushing through, they found Randall sprawled in the dirt, blood seeping from a wound in his side. What happened? Josephine cried, kneeling beside her brother despite everything. Gambling dispute, a bystander explained. He accused Fletcher of cheating. Fletcher took exception. The town doctor arrived, examining Randall with practiced hands. Knife wound deep, but it missed anything vital. He'll live, provided infection doesn't set in. He looked up at Josephine. He needs proper care? Somewhere clean. Without hesitation, Josephine turned to Henry. We have to take him home with us. Henry's expression was complex concern for his wife, battling with justified wariness of his brother-in-law. But he nodded. Of course. He's family. That decision to show compassion where none had been given marked another turning point in their lives. For 3 weeks, Randall recuperated in the Adamsons' cabin, his initial belligerence gradually giving way to silent observation and, eventually, grudging conversation. He watched as Henry and Josephine rebuilt their barn together, noted their easy partnership, the gentle way Henry ensured his pregnant wife didn't overexert herself, the respect with which they treated each other's opinions. It was a stark contrast to the relationships Randall had known, including the broken one with his sister. One evening, as Josephine brought him supper, Randall finally broke his silence on the matter that hung between them. I was wrong, he said simply. About him. About you. About many things. Josephine sat beside his bed, her expression cautious but hopeful. You were grieving, Randall. We both were. But hurting me wasn't the answer. No, he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. It wasn't. I became everything our father warned us against. The drink, the gambling, the anger. He met her eyes directly. I'm sorry, Josie. For the bruises. For the harsh words. For the barn. You admit it then? Henry asked from the doorway, having overheard the confession. Randall nodded slowly. I was blind, drunk, and full of resentment. Thought I was teaching you a lesson. His laugh was hollow. Instead, you took me in when I was bleeding in the street. Shows who the better person is. People can change, Randall, Josephine said quietly. If they want to. Maybe, he conceded. But some things can't be undone. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted me gone once I'm healed. Henry exchanged a glance with Josephine, a silent communication born of their deep connection. Actually, he said, we have a proposition for you. The proposition was straightforward. The Adamson homestead needed another experienced hand, especially with Josephine's confinement approaching. The Owens Ranch, meanwhile, was floundering under Randall's mismanagement and accumulating debts. By selling the Owens property and investing a portion of the proceeds in the Adamson operation, they could create a partnership beneficial to all. A fresh start, Henry explained. For all of us. Randall considered the offer for several days before accepting. The sale of the Owens Ranch, the land their parents had worked so hard to build, was bittersweet, but necessary. With the debts cleared and the remaining funds reinvested, the expanded Adamson Ranch promised a new beginning. As autumn painted the Colorado landscape in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, Randall Owens took his first steps toward redemption, literally and figuratively. He forswore alcohol, applying himself to the ranch work with dedication that impressed even Henry. The two men, once adversaries, developed a cautious respect that gradually evolved into genuine friendship. By winter, the Adamsons' permanent home was complete, a sturdy two-story structure with room for their growing family. On a snowy December evening, with Randall and Mrs. Thornton in attendance, Josephine gave birth to a healthy baby girl they named Elizabeth after Henry's mother. As Henry cradled his newborn daughter, with Josephine radiant despite her exhaustion, he reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. From a chance encounter outside a cabin to a partnership that had weathered violence, betrayal, and reconciliation, their love had not only endured but flourished. "She has your eyes," he murmured to Josephine, gently touching the infant's tiny fingers. "And your determination," Josephine replied with a tired smile. "Did you see how she announced her arrival? No hesitation whatsoever." Henry laughed softly. A true Adamson, then. From his position by the fireplace, Randall watched the new family with a complex mix of emotions. "She's beautiful, Josie," he offered. "Pa and Ma would have been proud. They would have been proud of all of us," Josephine answered, including her brother in the moment, "for finding our way back to being a family." As the winter snow blanketed the Colorado Territory, the Adamson homestead stood as a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and love. Inside its walls, a new generation represented hope for the future, a future built on respect rather than fear, partnership rather than domination. In the spring of 1877, with the ranch thriving under their combined efforts, Josephine stood on the porch of their home, watching as Henry taught Randall a more efficient method of breaking horses. The two men, now genuine partners in the enterprise, worked together with an ease that would have seemed impossible 2 years earlier. Elizabeth, now 4 months old, gurgled happily in her mother's arms as Josephine reflected on the remarkable journey that had led her here. From a frightened young woman enduring her brother's abuse to a confident wife, mother, and rancher, her transformation mirrored the wild beauty of the Colorado Territory itself, untamed, yet full of promise. When Henry glanced up and caught her watching, the love in his eyes was as clear as the mountain air. He excused himself from Randall and crossed the yard to join his wife and daughter. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping an arm around Josephine's waist. She leaned into his embrace, their daughter nestled between them. "More than I ever dreamed possible," she answered truthfully. "And grateful, every day, for the cowboy who said not again." Henry's kiss was gentle, a promise renewed with each passing day. "Best decision I ever made was standing in that doorway." Together, they watched the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in spectacular colors that seemed to celebrate their journey from darkness into light, a journey of healing, forgiveness, and enduring love in the untamed heart of the American West.